A guten Moed. Welcome. I hope everyone is having as good a Pesach as they can, and hopefully it is both meaningful and inspiring. We are approaching the last days of the holiday, and it would behoove us to reflect upon, let us call, the need for the celebration. After all, the Jewish people were freed already, and the Tziv even points out that when Paro told Moshe and Aaron to take all of the Jewish people out of Egypt, he said, just leave completely, giving them even more than they had asked for. They had only asked for a 3-day trip into the desert, a day to worship God, and then they would return. But he told them, as the Netziv explains on the Pasuk, Kala, the word Kala, he says actually they were freed completely. So if the Jewish people were freed completely, why did they have to go through this experience of being trapped on one side by the Egyptian army and on the other side, the Red Sea, with nowhere to go? It must have been a very traumatic experience. What was the need for the Jewish people to go through this to achieve their salvation? And if some of you are thinking that perhaps Paro still needed to be dealt with and that he hadn't suffered enough compared to the way he had treated the Jewish people, well, that might be true, but God could have settled accounts, so to speak, with Paro, with leaving the Jewish people out of it. Why did the Jews have to go through this experience where they are trapped, and it's so traumatic, and we therefore would, I think, reflect upon that and wonder what is there that the Jewish people gained by the experience. And perhaps we could suggest the following. Yes, the Jewish people had already achieved their emancipation from Egypt. Yes, they were a free people. Yes, they were on their way towards receiving the Torah. But there was another lesson that they needed to learn. And that lesson was that they could be a partner in miraculous events taking place. You see, when all of the miracles took place while they were in Egypt with the 10 plagues, they were just passive. They stood by and they just watched. They didn't do anything. But when it came to the Red Sea, the splitting of the Red Sea and that miracle, there the Jewish people actually had to step into the water first. In the example of Nachshon ben Aminadav, who actually walked in first, walked up to his neck until he couldn't walk any further, and then the sea split, and everyone followed him into the sea. And in the Yalkut Me'amloes, there's a quote from a medrash that actually describes it even more vividly, that the sea didn't split immediately all the way across so that they could see literally the light at the end of the tunnel. But there were tunnels being created as they stepped forward. In other words, as the Jewish people walked into the Red Sea, it cleared before them. And the more they walked in, the more they took the initiative, the more it cleared before them. That experience was therefore very valuable for the Jewish people to learn that they could actually, you might say, inspire God to cause miracles to take place. And they're, by virtue of being, in a small degree, a partner in the experience, that ultimately is very inspiring to recognize that we don't ever have to be resigned to our fate. To quote the words that were used by Chizkiyahu to Yeshayahu Hanavi, when Yeshayahu told him it was too late already. Chizkiyahu was sick, and he was told by Yeshayahu to put his affairs into order, and because it had already been decreed upon him that he was to pass away, and Chizkiyahu told him that you are wrong, Yeshayahu. Stop saying any prophecies. This is a tradition that I have going back to my ancestor, King David. Even if a person has a sharp sword pressed upon his throat, he still should not withhold himself from asking for mercy from the Almighty. And therefore the Jewish people learned that they should daven and participate. And if the message to them is to go into the sea, they'll go into the sea. And the miracle will happen that way. And that's the experience that the Jewish people had to learn. In Mitzrayim, they learned that God Almighty indeed controls the whole world, and they could learn that lesson from the 10 plagues. But now they learned another lesson. They could actually, to a degree, partner with the Almighty. And if they follow his words, it will ultimately result in the Almighty actually being a partner with the Jewish people and bringing about their salvation. We now perhaps need to have that particular lesson in mind as we are in a very trying time. But it's a time that we can also be saved from. And we can, in fact, have the Almighty take away this particular virus that is plaguing us at this time. It doesn't have to be the way it is. The same way this came upon us without almost any notice, so too it can be taken away. And with God's help, it will be. And this perhaps is a lesson that we should learn. We should, so to speak, behave in such a way that we will ultimately receive the salvation of the Almighty. We'll partner with him, so to speak, and we will thereby receive his bountiful blessing and salvation for all eternity. May God grant us all a wonderful Yontif, a wonderful Pesach holiday. Hopefully it'll be a safe one, and hopefully all of us will be able to be inspired and having meaningful Yontif.